Let's bring in Mike Wilner now, columnist on the Blue Jays, longtime host of Jays Talk, play-by-play voice of the Toronto Blue Jays. How you doing, Mike?
Doing all right, thanks, Rod. How are you?
Well, 100%. And as the Blue Jays aficionado, historian, and broadcaster you've been for years, the last time you were on, you kind of said with us, you're cautiously optimistic where this team's going. And I'm looking at some of the preview going into the game tonight. The Blue Jays as a unit slugging .458. Vlady, slugging percentage of .635. They augmented at the trade deadline, Mike. What a great time it is to be a Blue Jays fan.
Yeah, you know what? It's very reminiscent of what it was like 6 years ago after the Blue Jays sort of plodded through the first 100 games of the season, and then they got a real boost at the trade deadline, an infusion of talent, and took off from there. And so far, the script has played out exactly the same. They were a little better going into the trade deadline than they were in 2015. They got a little less help, but they have taken off just as much. 9-2 since the deadline. They've won 10 of their last 12 games, and they are right back in the thick of things. So, yeah, it's a very talented team that has become even more talented. They have addressed the issues that have been the biggest problems. And let's not forget, too, that the schedule has opened up dramatically for them. They play, I think, 13 games against playoff teams the rest of the season out of their 52 games. So that's going to help a lot, too. I mean, it wasn't just a coincidence that it was the Kansas City Royals and Cleveland that came in to Rogers Center for that first homestand, and the Blue Jays looked so good. A lot of it has to do with how bad Kansas City and Cleveland are, but then they're going to play bad teams a lot for the rest of the year. So it's looking pretty good for them, I think.
Boy, have I got a lot to ask you, and I'll ask the viewers too to chime in with questions for Mike Wilner. But I mean, they just mowed the competition at Rogers Center, like you mentioned, the Royals and the Red Sox, chief among them. How much of that was the wave of being at home? Yes, they played well, but the adrenaline rush and everything, they looked so good and so happy to be at home.
They did. And you know what? It was a little bit of a surprise for me, I think, because first of all, 18 of the 26 guys had never played as Blue Jays in Toronto before. So it wasn't really home to them. And even the rest of them, I mean, Randall Grichuk and Tim Meza are, I think, the longest serving Blue Jays, and it's been 3 years, maybe 4. Bo Bichette's only played like 40 games in Toronto going into this homestand, and Vlad Guerrero Jr. maybe 70 or 80. So I was a little surprised that they were so happy, and it really did appear genuine. I was a little skeptical. Oh, maybe they're saying all the right things and all that stuff, but they were thrilled to be there, thrilled to have their own major league facility, thrilled with the crowd that was actually cheering for them, which is something that didn't happen almost at all in Dunedin and didn't happen nearly enough in Buffalo. So I do think that there was a boost. I've always said that baseball is unlike hockey and basketball in that wanting it more doesn't help you win. Right? In hockey, you can win a battle in the corners. In basketball, you can win a fight for a loose ball. And in football, you can take the ball away. Baseball, you can't, right? They get their turn, you get your turn, and there's really nothing you can do. Trying harder doesn't work in baseball. They're going to they're in Anaheim now, where the manager, Joe Maddon, is famous for saying, try easier, because trying harder doesn't work. But there did appear to be a tangible boost to the team from just being at home, from the crowd. And a few of them mentioned it to me over the course of the week. I asked them, can there really be an effect? And they were like, yeah, the energy is palpable, and you feel it, and it gives you a little boost. And they were able to run roughshod over Kansas City and Cleveland. I mean, they won 6 out of 7, and I don't think broke a sweat in any one of those wins. Boston was a little bit, tougher. The last 3 games were all one-run games, and they won 2 of them. But a 9-2 homestand is a 9-2 homestand.
Really interested to get your take on this. I'm just going to play word association, Mike. It's the first thing that comes to mind when I say George Springer.
A force. Look, he has been everything they hoped he would be and more. American League Player of the Week each of the last 2 weeks. He's the first Blue Jay ever to do that. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. did not have a great homestand. He did hit a couple of home runs, and both of them were big. But he hasn't really been hitting terribly well for him lately. And it's been seamless. They've, again, won 10 of 12 without major contributions from Vlady because of what George Springer has been able to do. And it was kind of cool that he did it in front of Alex Cora, the Boston series. Cora was one of the architects of the Astros cheating scheme who, Springer went along with, like everybody else went along with. And he's going to have to wear that for the rest of his career. But to do it in front of Cora, I think was especially special.
You know, as you talk, and I think about the matchup tonight, Vlady versus Shohei Ohtani. In football, and I spent 20 years in the Canadian Football League as a play-by-play guy, we always talked about quarterback matchups, right, Mike? And the quarterbacks themselves would say, we're not on the field at the same time. It's not a matchup of us two. What about this matchup tonight? Vlady versus Shohei. Is that
I mean, look.
Talk about it, please.
It's the same thing. They're not on the field at the same time, right? And even, in football where the quarterback sort of runs the show and controls the play, every play, these guys are just one of 9 in the lineup. And they'll both be expected to get big hits in big situations. And maybe, the one who does will have won the battle, quote unquote, between the two of them. But it's just going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be fun watching the two best hitters in the league playing in the same game. And it's might be even more fun on Thursday when Ohtani pitches against them. It's just going to be, it's not going to be a who's going to win the MVP referendum. It's going to be just, let's watch this and enjoy it.
Yeah. How much do you hear about that referendum? Because they were both all-stars, yes. But I mean, they're talking about Shohei is the greatest player potentially in Major League Baseball history. And you hear that argument too. Like, how much of a referendum is it? Or do we have to wait to see how this plays out this regular season?
I mean, I think if things go the way they've gone, then Ohtani's the MVP without question. And Vlad is the unanimous number 2 and maybe even hopefully gets a few first place votes. But I mean, when you're leading the league in home runs and having an incredible season offensively and throwing 100 innings at above average with, a ton of strikeouts and an ERA in the 3s, how can you not be the MVP? I mean, nobody else can do that. And you're doing it, Ohtani's doing it at such a high level where he's a top of the rotation starter and an MVP type bat. There's no question. As much as I've enjoyed watching what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has done, and even if Vladdy wins the Triple Crown and overtakes Ohtani for the home run lead, it's very hard to imagine anyone but Shohei Ohtani winning the MVP so long as he stays healthy and so long as he continues to be productive on the mound. If he slipped to the point where he was a below average pitcher and having an incredible season at the plate where someone was having an incredible season at the plate, then maybe you could see it. But right now, if Shohei Ohtani was a hitter only, then I would say Guerrero's the MVP. But given that Ohtani is doing what he's doing on the mound as well as leading the league in home runs, I mean, there isn't a question, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Vladdy's having his great season, but they're both having great seasons. How about that? From our viewers, Jeff Cabillas in Winnipeg says, Ohtani's still my pick for MVP unless he somehow drops off in production. From Get Dagger in Edmonton, he says Ohtani should get Cy Young and Vlady should get the MVP if he wins the Triple Crown. From Spider Dan watching on YouTube, Ohtani, no questions asked. As much as I'm a Jays fan, best pitcher and hitter on his team, I would suggest in the American League, maybe in the game. And William May in Lloydminster says, I know where I'll be at 4:07 p.m. watching the Jays. Mike, how exciting is it to be where you are in the epicenter of Blue Jays Nation and seeing the country wake up to what the Blue Jays are doing? Because as you know, the country isn't always dialed into the Toronto Blue Jays. You've been following them long enough. But when they get on a run, They are. And it started earlier than normal this year. Do you sense it? Do you feel it?
I mean, I do now, without doing what I'm doing anymore as far as, hosting a post-game show and being on the air coast to coast to coast. It is more difficult for me to get a sense of what the Prairies are feeling and what's going on in BC as far as the Blue Jays go in Manitoba in the East. So, I hope the country has sort of picked up on it. I know that the return of the CFL is getting a lot of attention west of Ontario for sure, which is great. But it's nice to have the whole country coming together because, look, it's the one baseball team in the country, and they're having a great year. They really have picked it up when they've needed to with the reinforcements that they've gotten. And I know what it's like to have the whole country behind you. I was around in 15 and 16, and I was not in that position, but in 92 and 93, and I was there, and it's great. And it's just too bad that there's not, the people aren't able to travel as much, and that there are only 15,000 people allowed in the seats. That's a whole other discussion. It would be great if we saw the whole, people holding signs up. I traveled 5,800 kilometers to be here and stuff like that. That may not happen this year, may not happen until next year, but it could. So it really is. It's heartwarming to see how much of the country is behind this team, and it's a wonderfully entertaining baseball team.
Yeah, well, and they've earned it. And as I've told you in the past, I used to opt those games on 1190 CFSL Weyburn. I loved it so much. And used to tape the Tom Cheek Daily Baseball Report. Loved it so much. My last question for you, Mike. Yeah, my last question. Well, I always got to bring up Tom because he's in your Twitter, so I know what he means to you. Just lastly, do the Blue Jays have enough? I mean, they were a contender. Their record said they were before the trade deadline, and now this. But there's still a lot of teams between them and the division lead. I mean, what would be a success for them in your mind? And how do you maybe see this playing out? Are they good enough to go all the way?
I don't think the division matters. I think that, unfortunately, it's Tampa Bay is a little too good to pick up that kind of ground on them. I mean, look at what they did to Boston this weekend, and I think in 2 weeks they've shaved 5.5, 6 games off of Boston's lead. Boston was in first place when the Blue Jays played them at the end of July and split that 4-game series at Fenway. They are no longer. But see, the thing is, Boston is not a very good team, and they're showing that they were sort of a house of mirrors, if you will. They were an illusion, and the glass is shattered now. And I think the Red Sox are going to wind up finishing 4th in the American League East. But I do think the Blue Jays are one of the best teams in the league now, with the additions of Jose Barrios. Tim Meza getting hurt doesn't help. And Joaquim Soria, one of the pitchers they picked up, getting hurt doesn't help. But they still have a much, much, much stronger bullpen than they did. And the starting pitching, with a top 4 of Ryu, Ray, Barrios, and Manoah, that's serious. And they've got a team ERA under 3 since the All-Star break. Even with Ryu blowing up on Sunday like he did, the starter's ERA was 2.25 for the homestand, which is just silly. I would be very, very surprised if the Blue Jays don't get a wild card. I don't know whether it'll be the first or second. I don't know if the wild card game will be in Toronto or if they'll have to go. It's funny, 2 weeks ago, we were assuming that the wild card game would be at Fenway because Boston had all but locked it up. And now Boston is showing what they are, and they did not get better at the trade deadline. So I think it's going to be a battle between the Blue Jays, Yankees, and A's for those 2 wild card spots. And I think the Blue Jays are easily the best team of the 3.
Yeah, and George Springer's healthy now, and as we knew, he can win games by himself, and he did it the other night. So, Mike, always enjoy the visit, my friend. Enjoy the ride. Hopefully we can do it here before it's all said and done.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Mike Wilner joining us from Toronto talking Blue Jays baseball.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.